Hello everybody, and happy Juneteenth. And I want to talk about this because it is something that is very important. And I know for a lot of people you're asking yourself, what does this white woman know about the Willie Lynch letter or indoctrination or prejudice or hate for that matter? I actually know a lot about it. My children are biracial, and that doesn't mean that I know or understand the suffering that Black people have endured, Native American people have endured. I am Native American, but I have a very unique perspective due to a long history of violence in my life against me from both sides of the fence, from both colors. And I like to think that God led me to look a little bit deeper into the Willie Lynch letter. And generally, I'm not talking about things like that, but today is, it's a big deal that this needs to be recognized as an issue that can actually be healed. And Black people have been trying to share this message for a long time. I mean, throughout all the 1900s or 1950 and beyond, like Louis Farrakhan, Frederick Douglass. Obviously Frederick Douglass was way before 1950, but just saying. The Million Man March, this was what they had in their hands to spread this message. But for some reason, obviously we know the reason, power and control. Like what I'm generally talking about, violence against women and children, more power and control from men in power. And as a woman, I have a unique perspective of wanting equal rights, but I also have a perspective of wanting equality as a whole for all of the races. My unique perspective isn't just my biracial children or my white family in West Virginia or being treated in certain ways by certain people in the races and genders. In addition to knowing how it feels to be controlled. And so I just wanted to kind of go over a few things before I got into this because it is explicit. I really wanted to read the whole thing just so it could take the effect that it's had on me and anyone I've shared it with. But I am just going to read a few parts of it. And before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I feel about the letter as a whole. When I first read it, it was like a light bulb went off. And actually it was, the full letter was read on audio on YouTube, but a part of it's been deleted to where there's only like 20 minutes left of it. So I do feel at a certain time that someone like me, a white woman, needs to talk about it because obviously Black people have been screaming it at the top of their lungs for decades and nobody's talking about it. So maybe if I talk about it, people will want to hear it and it might be able to make a change. So the Willie Lynch letter, the indoctrination, in 1712, a Barbadian slave trader named William Lynch came to Virginia and offered a way to control the Black slaves. It's basically called How to Make a Slave. And in it, what's highlighted and the thing that most stood out for me was how the differences were created from the very beginning. So things that we think as white and Black people are our own ideas, like, okay, so say for instance, Black people have different music that they like, or certain Black people wear louder colors, and Black people in general have a different lingo, a different speech patterns, things like that, that in society, light-skinned black people and dark-skinned black people are viewed differently. How the black woman, the grandmother, is the head of the household generally, and how the black man is broken down through the system and emasculated by the woman, and how black women, and this is in the indoctrination basically, how black women make the perfect worker for the white man, for black women to be eating out of the palm of the white man's hand, and to sow seeds of discord and distrust, a constant feeling between the races of anger, hatred, envy, just fear of the unknown, because this indoctrination sowed these seeds of making white people use this indoctrination. Even the slave owners' wives and children, their families, were encouraged to use this on the slaves. So basically to use them for whatever they see fit. And to where this has caused as a whole, and this was only supposed to last for 300 years, and it's been around 320 years. And so it's turned into be white people feeling superior, black people feeling inferior. And this is not to say that please no one take offense. This is just saying that as a whole, through the races, psychologically and socially, as a whole in the races, white people feel superior to black people, and black people feel inferior. They're also treated that way. Their property is not worth as much as a white person's property. Still to this day, there are still inequalities that have echoed throughout time, and it's actually all based on this indoctrination, which is only to focus on the differences of the races. So by creating the divide of a difference, it's sowing these seeds of when we've gone from generation to generation, people thinking it's their idea that, and this is in the black household based on the letter, that there are basically pitting the older black male and the younger black male against each other. How to break a black person, and that they don't call them black people in this. And like I said, it's very graphic, it's very violent, and that's why it needs to be heard. So people understand that if children were to be taught about this, say in elementary school when history is taught, which not all history is even taught, and a lot of it isn't history that's taught. The most darkest parts of our history are not. So that's important. So we do teach that to change the world. So if children were to learn that, say they came from a household filled with hate, that they learn in school, and I just want to add this too, there are deniers. There are people that want to stay in power and want to keep this going, obviously. They want to call it a hoax. I don't think so. I don't believe that. And, there's people like that everywhere. Just find the red hat. But anyway, so sowing these seeds of discord within the household, and basically creating divides within the family, within the races, to be able to capitalize off and commercialize the labor of black people. Even the enslaving and the violent murders of black men to break them down in society is part of the indoctrination. And when you look at, and back to, a child in school, if you were to teach a child that this was an evil man who taught people who were hurting other people how to trick their mind into thinking these things. White people are better than black people. That's a lie. That was part of this big lie, and so on. That could change the world and create world peace within the races, at least black and white. And I mean, I feel like that could be, this is just a colonized region kind of thing, but look at all of the regions all over the world that are obviously colonized. It came from that. It came from Britain, England, and it was brought over here. It wasn't Black people's ideas to be different from us, and it wasn't our idea. Well, I say the slave traders, distant past ancestors, people that are dead. The only thing that still lives is this. So, and like I said, if you have any children at this point, please take them out of the room. This is not appropriate for children. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple miles back. You're not only losing valuable stocks by hangings. You are having uprisings, slaves are running away, and your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires, your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I'm not here to enumerate your problems. However, I am here to induce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your Black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if it is installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple, and any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On the top of my list is age, but it is there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. Then there is intelligence, size, sex, size of plantation, status on plantation, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The Black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generation for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. I don't think so. Don't forget, you must pitch the old Black male versus the young Black male, and the young Black male against the old Black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all Blacks. But it is necessary your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are the keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and your children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensively for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. And let's see here. I'm going to read a quote from Frederick Douglass. Conscious of the injustice and wrong they were every hour perpetuating, and knowing what they themselves would do were they victims of such wrongs. They were constantly looking for the first signs of dread retribution. They watched, therefore, with skilled and practiced eyes, and learned to read, with great accuracy, the state of mind and heart of the slave, through his sable face, unusual sobriety, apparent abstraction, sullenness, and indifference. Indeed, any mood out of the common way afforded ground for suspicion and inquiry. Frederick Douglass. There's a little bit more I do want to read, and this is the part that is pretty explicit, and it has some inappropriate language. What do we need? First of all, we need a Black nigger man, a pregnant nigger woman, and her nigger baby boy. Secondly, I will use the same basic principle that we use in the breaking of a horse, combined with some more sustaining factors. When we do it with horses, we break them from one form of life to another. That is, we reduce them from their natural state in nature, whereas nature provides them with the natural capacity to take care of their needs and their needs of their offspring. We break that natural string of independence from them and thereby create a dependency state so that we may be able to get from them useful production for our business and pleasure. Both horse and nigger are no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. For the orderly futures, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and the young offspring. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety and division of labor. Both must be taught to respond to a particular new language. Psychological and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. We hold the above 6 cardinal principles as truths to be self-evident based on the following discourse concerning the economics of breaking and tying the horse and the nigger together, all inclusive of the 6 principles laid down above. Accordingly, both wild horse and a wild or natural nigger is dangerous even if captured, for they will have a tendency to seek their customary freedom, and in doing so, might kill you in your sleep. You cannot rest. They sleep while you are awake, and are awake while you are asleep. They are dangerous near the family house, and it requires too much labor to watch them away from the house. Above all, you cannot get them to work in the natural state. Hence, both the horse and the nigger must be broken. That is, break them from one form of mental life to another. Keep the body and take the mind. In other words, break the will to resist. Now, the breaking process is the same for both the horse and the nigger, only slightly varying in degrees. But as we said before, there is an art in long-range economic planning. You must keep your eye and your thoughts on the female and the offspring of the horse and the nigger. And I really hate saying the word so many times, but it's so vile that I need it to make an impression. And there is definitely a couple more I want to get to. Let's see here. Completely break the female horse until she becomes very gentle, whereas you or anybody can ride her in comfort. Bred the mare and the stud until you have the desired offspring. Then you can turn the stud to freedom until you need him again. Train the female horse whereby she will eat out of your hand, and she will in turn train the infant horse to eat out of your hand as well. Take the meanest and most restless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female, the nigger infant, tar and feather him. Tie each leg to a different horse in opposite directions, set him fire, and beat both horses to pull him apart in front of the remaining niggers. The next step is to take a bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger male to the point of death in front of the female and infant. Don't kill him, but put the fear of God in him, for he can be useful for future breeding. The breaking process of the African woman. Then take the female and run a series of tests on her to see if she will submit to your desire willingly. Test her in every way, because she is the most important factor for good economics. Test if she shows any sign of resistance in submitting completely to your will. Do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to extract the last bit of bitch out of her. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so, you spoil good economics. When in complete submission, she will train her offspring in the early years to submit to labor when they become of age. By her being left alone, unprotected, and actually I skipped a part that is important. Understanding is the best thing. Therefore, we shall go deeper into this area of the subject matter concerning what we have produced here in the breaking process of the female nigger. We have reversed relationships. In her natural and uncivilized state, she would have had a strong dependency on the uncivilized nigger male. And she would have a limited protective tendency toward her independent male offspring and would raise the female offspring to be dependent like her. Nature had provided time with this balance. We reverse nature by burning and pulling one civilized nigger apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. What does this mean for society right now? What are we doing? What has society done to the black household compared to the white household? Not to say there's not a lot of dysfunction in the white household, but specifically we're talking about slavery. Africans being brought over as a product. Black women are not independent by their own accord, on their own decision. Black men and women and any dysfunction in the family, or the males being brutally murdered in the street, killed, murdered, murdering each other, hating themselves deep within, hurting the women, abandoning them, the grandmother and the mother's the head of the household. She's strong and independent. That is not their idea. The family unit, the regular family unit, a wife and a husband, a child being protected with a mother and a father. Instead, indoctrination created the opposite for the black people. Not to say this hasn't been overcome in families, but as a whole, this indoctrination in every single aspect has lasted 321 years. And to understand for black and white people that, guess what? It's not your idea to be different. It's not your idea to fear and distrust and have anger and envy towards each other within the races. And as far as North Carolina goes, when slavery was ending and Virginia wanted to end it, North Carolina stepped in and just decided that they weren't going to call it that anymore. They were still going to do it. They just weren't going to say it. I think that goes the same for the violence against women and children as well. But I mentioned North Carolina because obviously I live there. I live here. And it is, the largest, densest population where most of the slave traders actually brought the slaves. And there's a lot of prejudice between the races here, or at least that I have felt, especially from black women. Obviously, because I have biracial children, or just from my presence. And I mean, obviously, that was very easy in my situation with someone wants to harm me, to use that. And that's definitely been used. All at the same time, I have nothing but love. I'm not that person. And for all of these children growing up in hateful households, thinking it's their idea to hate black people, or thinking that they're getting too many benefits, or we're helping them too much. Guess what? A child should be able to decide for himself with the facts. These are the facts. And I'm hoping that these facts will start to matter to, as far as a history of black people trying to give this to spread this message. I think that white people need to start spreading this message. You don't like rap music? Well, guess what? The white slave owners told them that they had to make different music, that they were going to speak a funny new language. It's not their idea. It's indoctrination. Well, until next time, hope you all enjoyed this, and hopefully it'll help somebody you know, because it's definitely helped me understand and just, an instance where the place I lived last, my neighbor was a little old black lady. And it was when I first found this, and I talked to her all the time. Her name was Gloria. She's like 83. And I played some of this for her. I asked her if she had ever heard it. I wanted her to hear it. She just was so emotional, and she cried. Her whole life, she's seen so much and so much hatred, and yet she didn't even know about it. Well, I think people need to know about it. Peace.